pushing the limit. I'm pushing the limit. I'll take it as far as I can go. So let's go. Whoa. I'm working overtime and I do.
Welcome to another edition of the Tom Denos podcast. I am back in Los Angeles to bring you what is sure to be an absolutely incredible episode. Today's episode is aptly titled Karate's Bad Boy, Hollywood's Good Guy for a reason. In a moment, you'll understand why. My guest today broke through with his iconic turn as Karate's bad boy Mike Barnes in The Karate Kid Part 3. He recently reprised the role in the global phenomenon series Cobra Kai. He is also well known for portraying A.J. Quartermain on General Hospital and Deacon Sharp on The Bold and Beautiful and The Young and the Restless. He is the creator of the Emmy Award-winning series Studio City, which I need you to check out and love that series. He is in the Martial Arts Masters Hall of Fame. He has a star on the Palm Springs Walk of Stars, and if this wasn't enough, he is an accomplished author, acting coach, and he has created a line of hot sauce that I'm going to sample at the end of the show today. But the main reason why I wanted to have him on the show is because he is also a successful life coach. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Sensei Sean Kanan.
Tom, it's so good to be here with you.
It's so great to have you on.
Yeah.
While it's still fresh on people's minds, I want to touch on Cobra Kai briefly. So, stepping back into the role of Mike Barnes, I know you've talked about it quite a bit. Social media comments when Cobra Kai was going on, before you came on, people were foaming at the mouth to have Mike Barnes back. How did that feel to have that character just so beloved, even though he was such a bad boy? And people, you probably saw the comments on social media, people begging to have him on. Why did people, why are they so drawn to Mike Barnes?
Boy, I don't know. That's a good question because he's a pretty reprehensible character. Yeah. I don't know. I think because, he was really a bad guy in the films. Johnny was Daniel's nemesis, but Mike Barnes was pretty unredeemable, which is why it was so great to have the opportunity back to Cobra Kai, because 35 years later, we get to see some evolution in the character, get to see some different colors that the guy really isn't completely a bad guy.
Right.
He had a redemption arc. And, whatever I do when I'm acting, I always try and find the nano shades of gray. I don't think very few things are monolithic in life. Bad people do good things, good people do bad things. And it's those moments of gray that I think make characters interesting.
Right. Was there any trepidation about coming back to the role at all?
No. Some of the people that have come back haven't really been acting steadily. They've gone into other things. I've been acting steadily for 4 decades now. I've kept up with my martial arts training, and I was really excited and appreciative and humbled for the opportunity, and also that the fans were they embraced the character so much, because that's a big reason why they brought me back, the fans.
It's funny, actually, today I was thinking about this. I was thinking about how I wish I had brought you back for the last season and have you involved in the tournament at the end.
Yeah.
To have you and Johnny and Chosen all together, because I would have loved to have seen, I was thinking about it, something happen with one of the other teams or one of the other senseis, whatever, and have you go into full-on old-school Mike Barnes mode.
Well, believe it or not, I was actually supposed to be in the final episode, and Josh Held called me up and he said, Sean, he said, we don't have the budget to do it. We're not getting the money from Netflix. And I even offered to go what's called a local hire, which means I fly myself down there and put myself up. And they said, we can't pay your rate. And it was really disappointing, because it would have been a great conclusion, I think, for the character.
Oh my God, absolutely.
Not to mention the fact that it was such a buildup of 6 seasons, international sensation and everything.
Yeah.
But, I focus on the positives. I focus on the fact that I got the opportunity to be a part of something that was like a zeitgeist. It was really incredible how this show, it started out on YouTube Red, and it was a small show then. And by the time I got on, which was season 5, it had become a phenomenon. And so it was difficult waiting from the sidelines, but in a lot of ways I got in at the best time.
What I love, is that you still, and everywhere you go to your the Comic-Cons, you go to the appearances, and you still embrace the character, and people still embrace it.
Yeah.
So talk about, when you get to meet people at these events, like that's where I got to meet you, right outside of Houston
Right.
at the one. So, how does it feel when people come up to you and they flock to your table and they, what do they want to talk about?
It's incredibly flattering. It really is. And I mean, 99.9% of the people are just terrific people. Some people that have started out as fans have become friends. And I really enjoy, getting to meet people from different parts of the country and different parts of the world.
Right.
And I think a lot of times when people have a character that's iconic, it becomes a bit of a double-edged sword for them. It has given them so much, yet they're so associated with it that there's some form of resentment, maybe subconsciously. And I don't have that at all. Part of it is because I've done a lot of other work besides Mike Barnes, so I don't feel that that's the thing that defines me. But it's wonderful to be recognized for that role by so many people. So yeah, that's why I embrace it.
So you talked about the evolution from Karate Kid 3 to Cobra Kai. When you got your first script, what was your mindset? How did you approach revisiting the character? Because I remember we talked about, enacting your super objective.
Super objective.
Super objective. Yeah. What was your super objective for Mike Barnes this time around?
I think it was his redemption. It was proving to himself that he was a worthwhile human being. And a lot of that he accomplished by getting married and learning how to do this woodwork. But there was a piece missing, and that piece was the apology to Daniel. But a verbal apology wasn't enough. And when Mike came back as one of the judges, I think that was his way of making an amends to Daniel. And even though he was a lot like a drill instructor, I think it was because, or at least what I chose to play, was that he knew how dangerous the Sekai Taikai was. And it was better that the kids sweat and bled during practice than they did getting hurt, at the tournament. And so he took it very seriously.
Got it. So let's go way back to the beginning. Read both your books, Way of the Cobra, this one, Welcome to Kumite, and then we also have another one that we're going to come back and talk about after I read it. And this one is called Way of the Cobra Couples, which you wrote with your wife.
Yes. So
we're going to definitely come back. This is going to be my summer reading list. We're going to come back and talk about this one for sure. But tell me about the Jewish kid from Western Pennsylvania who was chubby, quote, chubby, insecure, and awkward with glasses.
Yeah. I'm gonna skip ahead for a second and then circle back to that. One of the things that has been an unbelievable gift from playing Mike Barnes that I never anticipated at the time was I do a lot of speaking out and advocacy for anti-bullying. And, when you talk to kids who are younger and there's that generation gap, you've got a really, really small window of time to connect with them before they sort of zone out and you're just like another adult, right?
Right.
And so whenever I go to schools and I talk to kids, we always start by playing the iconic scene of Daniel LaRusso getting, tormented by Mike Barnes at the All Valley tournament. And when the clip finishes, I say, now, would you guys believe that scary guy used to get bullied? And, they're like, what? No way, no way. And then I tell them what it was like when I grew up. Yeah, I was a chubby, awkward kid. I was self-conscious, and I grew up in it was rough enough. It wasn't like inner city rough, but it was rough enough. And I had a tough time for a long time. And I eventually, made my way into my first karate dojo, and through time and practice, I not only grew stronger physically, but my spirit finally healed or began to heal. And, it was a central step in bringing me to the place that I am now.
Right.
But I've never forgotten it. And, I think if you talk to most people on one level or another, in one way or another, they've had experiences with being bullied. And it's unbelievable how we still bear scars from things that happened so long ago. And that's why, I work with kids to try and eradicate bullying. And through my books, I help people heal those scars and sort of reform themselves.
Speaking of your books, which we're going to get into the books in just one second, What's the earliest age you think that kids should start engaging with your books? What do you think would be the earliest?
I would say if they're good readers, I would say 13, 14. And that's not to say that these books are not for adults, because they are.
Right.
But, here's the thing. I tell people that the information in my books is brilliant, and it sounds arrogant, but then I tag that with it's not my information. It's all of our information.
And it is brilliant. I've read both.
I'm the messenger. And it's kind of like if you're 13, 14, 15 and you're at that age where, your dad might be giving you good advice, but you're just not hearing it because you're at that age. And then, 20 years later, you read my books and go, wow, that's just great information.
Right.
It's because of the messenger that I'm able to help permeate that, that armor.
Right.
Yeah. So, and it's stuff that I think that people either know intuitively or it's within them and it needs to be discovered by them. But it's great information because it's universally true information.
Right. Exactly right. So what got you into the life coaching field?
I think it's a combination of things. I've always loved writing from the time I was really young. As a matter of fact, I wrote a film that Lionsgate distributed called Chasing Holden. And the genesis for that was I went back and looked at a journal I'd written when I was in boarding school. And I read a line in it. And that was the touchstone for me to write this movie. So I've been writing for as long as I can imagine.
What was the line? Can you say what it was, or was it too personal?
No, it's not too personal. It was, I hadn't seen my father in a long time. His hair's turned gray. My mom thinks it's sexy. She would. Which is no indication about my mother. At the time, maybe, I don't know what it was. I think I just read Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
But that was one part of it. And the other part was, I struggled for a long time as an adult. I struggled with drinking. Mm-hmm. I struggled with a lot of things, and I had a moment of catharsis where I had clarity and decided that I was going to change my life, that there was going to be no more waiting for my ship to come in. I was going to build the damn ship.
Right.
And I just had to figure out how, which I did. And I share the strategies and the philosophy that I use to do it. And I am no different than anyone else. If I can do it, anyone can do it.
What was that moment of clarity, if you don't mind sharing that?
It's actually two.
Okay.
One was when I turned 50. I received a star on the Palm Springs Walk of Fame. The mayor gave me the key to the city, and people came and said nice things about me. And from the outside, I probably looked like I was relatively successful, but from the inside, I felt like a complete fraud. I was 40 pounds overweight. I was hanging onto a job by the skin of my teeth, and I was really dealing with the alcohol issue. And I think that's the first time that I was really looked in the mirror and said, I got to do something here. And if I don't, I'm going to have a life that's at best mediocre. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't live with that. I couldn't live with knowing that God has given me so many talents. And, the saddest thing is when you're talented and you waste it for one reason or the other. The other catalyst was another time, when I was drinking. I remember my wife said something to me. She never got upset with me. She never threatened to leave or divorce me. But she said, I've put everything into this relationship. Please tell me I didn't back the wrong horse. And it just hit me.
Yeah.
That was the thing that finally resonated. And I said, there's no way that I'm going to take this woman down who I love so much because I can't get my shit together. And I'd like to say that I did it in a New York minute, and I didn't. There were, false starts and steps backward, not just with the drinking, with everything. But once I got set on that path, I couldn't have the life that I had before. And I started doing some things very differently. Here's the thing. Most challenges in life, this applies. The solution is almost always simple. That doesn't mean it's easy.
Right, exactly.
And the solution for me was simple. The first thing I needed to do was I needed to stop drinking. I needed to lose 40, 50 pounds because I was wondering why the phone wasn't ringing for acting jobs. And I needed to figure out who I was. I needed to work on my self-awareness. And I talk about this in my TEDx, which is out there. I say, from the time we're young, we're pushed to become someone, to become successful, to become. And I think possibly that's not necessarily for everybody the right roadmap. Maybe true happiness, true success is less about becoming and about unbecoming. We've got so many external influences from from commercials bombarding us 24 hours a day saying, you have to have this to be successful, in social media and the airbrush covers of magazines. And I think, and then you got the monkey chatter inside your head with the inner critic and all that stuff. And I think if you can strip that stuff away, it allows you to access your authentic self. And everybody's authentic self is enough. And it's like that Zen riddle. How did the ship get in the bottle? It was always there. Everything you need is already within you. You just have to get in touch with it. And there's this great quote, can you remember who you were before you were told who to become? And I started thinking about that. And I started doing things differently. I started thinking differently. I started becoming intentional with everything I did. Intentional with the food I put in my mouth, with the people that I associated with the way I spent my time. And I started getting some pretty miraculous results fairly quickly. And it was like the sky had parted, and all the things I couldn't understand why they weren't working for me in my life began to work. And one of the things that is a big part of my life, and I also think is a big part of whatever success I've had, is being of service. Without any subterfuge, without any other reason to do it other than, for me, I believe that helping other people, the fastest way to get what you want is to help other people get what they want.
Right.
And I found that to be so true because what that does is, you live in abundance. I'm a big proponent of the law of vibration,
right?
Which
read that in the book. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, everything vibrates: thoughts, emotions, words. And of course, physical things do. And the universe, which might seem like it's unfair much of the time, it's not unfair. It's not fair. It just is. And one of the laws of the universe, whether you believe them or not, they affect all of us, is that like matches like. Vibration. So if you're putting out a vibration of scarcity, I don't have any money, I can't get a job, I can't get a girl, all the universe hears is, oh, you don't have, you're in scarcity.
Exactly right.
I'm going to give you more of it. But when you live in abundance and gratitude, the universe gives you more of it. It also helps you to stay in the present because, one of the biggest causes of anxiety for people is worrying about the future. The future is unknown. Human beings hate the unknown. And in the absence of knowing what's going to happen, we create these incredible stories in our head, much of which never come true.
Right.
And they cause a hell of a lot of chaos between our ears. Also, if you're focusing, on the future, you can't be 100% focused on what you're doing in the present.
Right.
So these are all a lot of things that, like I said, these are all things that we all intuitively know. But putting them into practice, into action is what makes the difference.
Right.
And once I started doing that, I look at things like life is holistic. I believe that if one part of your life is working, that if you can really focus on that, sooner or later, it's going to permeate into other areas of your life, and that's going to start working. And conversely, if one part of your life isn't working, and is destructive, it will permeate into everything else.
Well, he takes a break for a second.
That was a mouthful.
It's not it's not often I'm left kind of speechless during my interview, but circling back to when you talked about how you had started becoming intentional with everything that you did, and that means that you had to put everything into action. And the word action is so prevalent in both of your books.
Yeah.
Why is it?
In the beginning of the book, I talk about the philosophy of Way of the Cobra. Cobra's an acronym. It's formed from character, optimization, balance, respect, and abundance. And I talk about strategy. And philosophy without strategy, without action, is impotent. It's theoretical. It lives in your head. And strategy without the philosophy to govern it is like a wildly slashing katana doing damage everywhere but never hitting its intended mark. And so you have to have both of them in balance. And that's why it's so important. But, without action, that's what optimization is. It's making the right decision at the moment a decision is needed to be made, without hesitation. And it won't always be the right decision.
Right.
But when it's time to act, when it's time to strike, it's time to strike. And, people get that, what do they say, paralysis of analysis.
Exactly right. Exactly right. You mentioned your TEDx talk, and please go watch on YouTube. You can see his TEDx speech. It's incredible. And I know the story. I know some viewers of mine probably don't, but you had a life-changing, life-altering medical incident.
I did.
And I would love for you to talk to that to my viewers who may not know, because it's incredible. And it's going to leave you speechless.
So Christmas Day 1988, most people were with their friends and their families celebrating. I was in a Las Vegas emergency room bleeding to death. I was 22 years old. What had happened was we broke for Christmas from Karate Kid 3, and I was having pretty significant pain in my upper left thigh, which I attributed to all the martial arts I was doing because we were training relentlessly. So I was taking a lot of aspirin. Aspirin's a blood thinner. What the pain was from was internal bleeding from a stunt that I did, and it was dripping on my femoral artery. And it was causing me the pain. The aspirin, of course, exacerbated it, and I passed out. They took me to the hospital. They told me that they were going to have to operate. I thought that meant Monday. They meant in 15 minutes. Had me sign a piece of paper acknowledging they didn't know if they could save my life. I mean, shit was getting real very quickly. My parents are on the East Coast. It's midnight. My friend called them. They could only get one ticket at that hour, so my dad came out. And I always think what my dad must have been thinking, knowing his son is in emergency surgery, doesn't know anything, and you've got that 5-hour flight. It must have been torturous for him. I woke up. I had probably a 14-inch wound on my abdomen held together with surgical staples. And the first thing I thought about was, what about the movie? What am I going to do? And I didn't have to wait very long because I got a call from John Avildsen, who was the director. And he basically said that if I wasn't back in 2 weeks, I was going to get fired.
And not to cut you off, because I wanted to ask you about that. Was that his decision, or was that a studio decision? Was he the messenger, or was that his decision?
I think by the time John was filming Karate Kid 3, he was, for the most part, the guy.
Okay.
And look, he wasn't. It's called show business, not show friends.
Right.
If you can make some friends in show business, that's nice, but it's a business. And, this was a multi-million-dollar franchise. And at that moment, I was causing a problem. They were not concerned really with me. They were concerned with, the cog that I was in the machinery.
Of course.
And it was a tough lesson, but it was a good lesson that I learned. It didn't make me jaded. It didn't make me cynical, but it gave me a clear understanding that this is a business. And the cardinal rule in the business is never slow down the machine. But at that point in my life, I'm 22 years old, and I was pissed off, man. I was angry. I felt the universe was being unfair. I had worked so hard to get this role. I had beaten out literally 10,000 people for this role. 10,000. Stood in line with 2,000 at the open call, where John picked me out of the line.
So how do you pick out? So you're standing there in line.
Yeah.
Thousands of hopeful actors to play along with Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid, and he just...
Well, I'll tell you a funny thing. So, we carry these seminal moments in our head, and sometimes through the prism of time and experience, what really happened differs from what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing an interview just before season 5 of Cobra Kai on the set of Bold and the Beautiful, and it was Entertainment Tonight, and I said, this is so surreal because when I got the role for Karate Kid 3, Entertainment Tonight interviewed me, and the host said, well, we're going to find it because we've got this vault with all of our, archives. And so they found it. So long story short, if you want to actually see the exact moment, better than I can describe it, just Google Sean Kanan, Entertainment Tonight, and they have footage from the open.
Okay.
Because look, this was the 3rd installment of a successful franchise, and it needed a shot in the arm. And I think, to this day, I think it was, like a way to stimulate publicity for the franchise. I don't think they ever really believed they were going to find a lead actor out of a bunch of people standing in line, many of whom were actors, but a lot of whom weren't.
Right.
But it got the casting process some press, right?
Exactly.
And lo and behold, they found me. And going back to the hospital room in Vegas, I was upset, but very quickly that anger crystallized into my why. My why was, no matter what, I'm going to finish this damn movie. And so the first day I got out of bed and I could barely make it to the bathroom in my room. And the next day I went outside my room and I could walk around the entire hallway once, and then 3 times the day after that. And by about day 4, I had them discharge me against medical advice.
Right.
And I went and recovered for about a week. And then I started training with a guy named Kyle Borland, who was a lineman for the Rams when the Rams were in Los Angeles way back then. And, the staples had barely come out. And, I could do 1 sit-up and then 10 and then 100. And long story short, I wound up doing all my own stunts in the film. And so people ask me, they say, what's your favorite project you've ever done? It must be the Karate Kid 3. It is, or at least the most meaningful. It is, but not for the reasons that people think.
So is that when you discovered your why?
I discovered the why that I needed to get me through
At that time.
Okay. Unfortunately, as the years went by, like I said, I lost my way for a good while. But maintaining my marriage and my relationship with the woman that I love, and my fear of not ever making a contribution in the world, just sort of swirling around the drain in that life of mediocrity. Those became my why. And I tell people all the time, I say, try and get a physical representation of your why. It can be a tattoo. It can be a painting. It can be a picture. For me, it's my wedding ring, So when things get difficult for me, the first thing I say is it as difficult as being told that the doctors don't know if you can live? No, probably not.
Right.
So buck up, buttercup.
Right.
And then the next thing is I look down at my wedding ring and it reconnects me with my commitment to my wife, which is my why.
Yeah. So my obsession with mindset and success kind of happened when my father passed away in 2016, because now, my male role model is gone, right?
Sure.
And so, you're kind of like, oh, crap.
What do I do now?
Yeah, what do you do now, right?
Yeah.
And so I started reading some books. I started, really kind of trying to reassess where I was at the time and really self-reflect. And so that's when I really started to, like I said, become more self-aware and really focus on being intentional, how you mentioned. And when it comes, I know you talk about success, I know you talk about meaningful happiness. So is there a correlation between, because I know I interviewed Coach Dale Brown, who coached LSU basketball, legendary coach, last year. And he talked about success, which I know the old definition in the dictionary, he talked about, success is described as fortunate, happy, kind, and prosperous at the time. And now it's attainment of wealth, fame and rank. Okay. So when I think about how success ties into that meaningful happiness, right? Everybody, I guess, has their own definition of success. And does that correlate into your own definition of meaningful happiness? Well, first of all, talk about when meaningful happiness
Let's talk about meaningful happiness
Let's talk about that
versus
first.
happiness.
Yeah.
Meaningful happiness is when you're happy inside with who you are. And that doesn't mean that you can't have a lousy day.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you don't get frustrated. But your sense of overall happiness and well-being is not dictated by external circumstances. There's one of the best lessons that I've ever learned is about control. Control's an illusion. The only thing that we can control are our emotional responses to external stimuli, how we choose to react. And it's like, every time you try to assert your will on somebody, it's the exact opposite effect. They recoil, they pull away, And if you still think you're in control, go look at the sun not too long and remember that it's a dying star that's going to someday go supernova and become a black hole and swallow the earth. And there's no power in the universe other than God Almighty that could stop that. So it kind of puts things in perspective with control. So that's my definition of meaningful happiness. Meaningful happiness, I think, is an umbrella that has other things subordinate to it that go into it. One of which is success, but it's your success. It's not the success that your parents tell you need. It could be that one, but not necessarily. It's not the one that society or social media tells you that you need. And the analytics, or the metrics rather, for how we gauge success in our society, generally it's wealth, position, power, and the toys that we accumulate.
Right.
And listen, I like nice things as much as the next guy, but you have to look at success not only in yourself, but in other people in an out-of-the-box way. And by that, I'll give you an example. You look at a guy who's 75 years old, he's an immigrant, doesn't speak English very well, he's worked as a janitor for 40 years. Absolutely admirable, but he's not the first guy that we're going to put at the top of our list of success. But if I told you that same guy saved all of his money and put his only daughter through medical school, and she became a brilliant research scientist, saving thousands of lives, I would say that he is the epitome of success.
Yeah.
And so we have to look at what that thing inside of us is that will allow us to feel successful, and then take that passion and put it into action and pursue it with reckless abandon.
And doing it for the good of other people, just like the father did.
Yeah, and you won't feel like you're working. I mean, I'm a busy guy, and I never feel like I'm working.
Right.
And I love that, and it keeps me passionate about everything that I do.
On your card here, on your promo card, there's a quote that you put. It said, let's see, about reading. You said you can read. You can read all the success books out there, but knowledge alone isn't enough.
That's right.
Without action, it's simply wasted potential. So, going back to action, why do people struggle so much with the action part?
I think people struggle with it because they're afraid of failing. And as soon as you learn that failure is an integral part of success, you cannot be successful long term without understanding failure. It demystifies it and it defangs it. If you learn to look at failure as a teacher, it removes a lot of the fear. I read a quote the other day. I forget who said it, but they said, "I never lose. I always win. I win or I learn." And, for the longest time, auditioning as an actor, I mean, actors spend the majority of their career seeking work, and auditions, you're putting yourself out there to be judged, and you can infer all sorts of things from it when it doesn't go your way. And you can look at it like, I didn't get this job, it's failure. But when you recalibrate the story that you attach to it, that maybe I got to read for a casting director who didn't know who I was. Maybe I got to rehearse a part that's out of my traditional wheelhouse. It pushed me,
Right.
If you look at it like that, no matter what you do, I know I'm relating that to acting, but with anything, I think that it takes away the fear of starting something for fear of failure.
Okay.
And then when you look at it from a more 30,000-foot view, we're a very result-oriented society. And I always say, if you want results, ignore them. Now, that sounds oxymoronic. But what I mean by that is concentrate on creating the bulletproof process necessary to achieve that result. And if you construct that process, which generally is what I call a system, which is a series of habits, okay? And you have an effective system and you apply it consistently, effectively, over the overarching course of time, you will experience results.
Right.
They may not come exactly when you want. They may not look exactly like you want them to look, but you will experience success. And when something isn't working and you break it down and say, okay, why is this not working? If you look at the habits that you're using that comprise the system, it's like a chain. You might find that one weak link and go, oh my God, okay. You know what? My sleep is off. I have to be honest. I've been not sleeping well for the last month,
right.
And it's causing my performance to da-da-da. Yeah, it could be a myriad of different things. But when you really stop and deconstruct it, instead of allowing yourself to sort of wallow in the emotionality of failure, but deconstruct it and look at it as a teacher and identify what's not working, that's refining the process. And if you reapply that process, sooner or later, if that process is effective, it's gonna bring results.
That's what Coach Nick Saban. He's always talks that his big thing, the process, and he tells the players, don't worry about the wins or don't worry about the end result. Focus on your job in the moment, and that'll all come.
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm a teacher in my day job, and that's kind of what I talk to my kids about when they take a test. And I ask them, how many of you are worried about failing the test? Like all the hands go up.
Right.
And I tell them, well, focus on one question at a time, right? Instead of and that next thing I ask them, well, when you're on question number 1, how many of you are already thinking about question 4 or 10 or 12?
Stay in the present.
All hands go up.
Stay in the present, right?
Right? And it's like a light bulb goes off, and like, oh, because I said, look, you can't get to question 4, can't question 8 unless you go step by step in the moment.
It goes back to what I was saying about sometimes it's the messenger, because if you think about it, when a teacher says, look, if you've done the work, you've done the studying, you're going to do well in the test. And if you don't do well, at least you're going to do the best that you can do. But the problem I would suggest with that is the lack of clarity in the message. Just saying, if you study, if you do A, you'll get B.
Right.
If you break down and say, if you do A, B, C, D, and E when you study, like how to study properly,
right?
How to visualize before you walk in that room, before you sit down at that desk. Did you need to take, do some meditation and some breathing so that you're not dealing with the anxiety that's trying to force out the knowledge that you have for the right answers. And if it's just maybe explained with a little more clarity, it's kind of the same thing I'm saying. It's focusing on the process.
And so, the other thing about that is, when it comes to, having to put a plan together and putting an action plan together, and correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't you say the first step really is that self-awareness piece? Like you need to know exactly
absolutely
where you're at,
absolutely
what you've done, and that way you can move forward with that plan.
Yeah.
But I think the self-awareness piece is like the first critical piece.
I would say there's one piece before that, because self-awareness is a prize. I said you have to do something else first. You have to take responsibility for your life.
Yep.
Your life is your fault. It's the sum total of all the decisions you've made, the questionable ones and the seemingly positive ones. And unfortunately, we now live in a society that in certain ways rewards victimhood. Victimhood allows, it's that birds of a feather thing, it's trauma bonding and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that people haven't had terrible things happen to them in the moment, but the decision to continue to see yourself as a victim rather than a survivor, or rather a thriver, that's a choice. And if you can, if you're 20 years old and you're still taking money from your parents, and you're pissed off at them because you think they're the reason that your life isn't going the way that you want, you need to read my books.
Yeah, I love that piece you talk about in the books,
because it's not your mom and dad's fault. It's not society's fault for not seeing what a special, unique individual you are. You got to take responsibility, and that's where the self-awareness eventually comes.
Something else you talk about that I think is really important is the self-respect, well, respect in general, and just much of our society has lost the ability to behave with civility and common courtesy. Respect must start at home, especially if you have children. And I cannot tell you how close to home that hit with my students, because you see it.
Right.
You see it in their actions. You see it in their behaviors. And then when you meet the parents, you're like, oh, okay, well now I understand.
Now you understand, right?
Now I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing we touched on a while ago, I want to go back to the success part, because you talked about what we see on social media. How can we teach, because our younger generation, either into TikTok, all those things, they see the stuff on TikTok, on Instagram. How can we teach our younger kids today that that's not really what you want to mirror, what you see, or I guess another way to put it, it's not really reality is what they're seeing. You know what I mean?
I think that part of it is the discovery of your self-awareness, but it's also your why. I think when kids have a really strong why, they're going to be a lot less invested in other people's lives.
Right.
They're going to focus on fulfilling, their goals fueled by their why. I worry about the younger generation because of COVID and the lack of socialization that they missed out on.
Exactly right.
From homeschooling.
Yep.
There's all sorts of problems that we're not going to be aware of for another 5-7 years. And that's important. I think that getting kids involved in sports, getting them involved in activities, getting them involved in things that force them to interact with other people that are microcosmic for life. I mean, you ever hear somebody say, you go golf 18 holes with a guy and you got a pretty good idea who he is.
Right.
Okay, I don't know if that's true or not, but if you're part of a team and you play a sport, it teaches you all sorts of things. And it doesn't just have to be sports. I mean, the chess club, whatever it is,
something
academic,
social,
something social, but something where you feel like, you're trying to accomplish something, you're learning something.
Purpose,
competing against yourself when you learn that. And I would think that those individuals that are involved in sports and other activities and have a really strong why, I'm guessing if you did some kind of sociological statistical study, they would be less inclined to overuse social media.
Right.
Because they're living their lives.
Yeah. Let's go back to you mentioned about competing with yourself, and that's a good segue into, you talk about internal obstacles in the book. And you talk about the acronym of FEAR, false evidence appearing real. So I kind of explain that.
Well, it's just, there's a lot of different masks that fear wears, but it comes from two places. It comes from fear of not getting what you want and fear of having what you have taken away. Okay? Both of which are living in scarcity, not abundance.
Right.
Look, there's fears that are natural, okay? You have to work to learn how to make fear an ally. It's difficult. It takes emotional self-discipline. We all get fearful of things. some fear is a good thing. Some fear is a good thing that lets us know not to put our hand on a stove, or, poke a bear with a stick, right? But I think staying in the present and not projecting into the future is a really good way to combat fear. Yeah.
Something you talked about, I think you talked about in your TEDx, you talk about in the book, it's really, really interesting, is making peace with your inner child. That's something that you're really big on.
I am big on that.
You really emphasize that.
It sounds kind of woo-woo, but
it's so interesting.
The pop psychology moniker, inner child, what it really is it's a vessel for all the toxic shame, for all the criticism, all the judgment that we've accrued over a lifetime, right? But the thing is, now as adults, sure, our feelings get hurt, but when you're a child and your psyche and your brain are still forming, you're not equipped to deal with the criticism and the judgment and things like that to the degree we are as an adult. And so the wounds are significant. And what happens is people cultivate two attitudes towards their inner child. They either resent it because they see it as a part of themselves that's weak and it disgusts them. And I know that's how I felt about mine. The little kid who couldn't defend himself, who was, awkward and chubby and all that sort of stuff. Or they look at their inner child as something that is so fragile and has to be so carefully dealt with that it kind of perpetuates victimhood. So you got to figure out a way that you can make peace with the inner child. And I've come up with something, and it sounds kind of corny. It's really it's really based in a type of therapy that's been around for a long time. You find something that represents your inner child, because I believe we all kind of have a mental picture of our inner child.
Exactly right.
Okay, it can be an actual photo. It could be a baseball glove. It can be a doll. It can be whatever takes you back to the moment where you feel like that, insecure child that was wounded. And once you key in emotionally to the memories of what your inner child, if you just say, listen, you're a part of me and I love you, but you're not who I am today. And if you understand that even the idea that we have of our inner child, again, it's formed through a prism of time and scars and pain. Anyway, you keep saying that over and over again, and you're not going to believe it the first 50 times.
Right.
But if you just keep saying, you are not who I am, but you're a part of me that I need, it will resonate with you. And the inner child's really, it's a valuable part of us because we can draw a tremendous amount of creativity from the inner child. I mean, as an actor, I have to go to uncomfortable places all the time emotionally.
Right.
But the secret to being an actor and being meaningfully happy is you have to learn how to go to those places and not believe that you have to embody that in your outside life in order to portray it.
Okay.
Okay? Because otherwise, sure, you might be a brilliant actor, but you're miserable,
So if I'm to understand it right, then so it's taking whatever trauma or maybe scarring you had as a kid and not letting it keep you down and define you.
Yeah.
But like I said, make peace with it, almost embrace it.
Yeah, you have to embrace it.
For the betterment of yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And once you do that, it's really powerful. It's really powerful. As adults, we get resentful because we also resent the fact that now, as reasonably capable adults, we could have protected that child, right? That never would have happened. The only problem is you don't have a time machine. You can't be in two places at the same time, okay? So you're asking something of yourself that's impossible.
Right.
The other thing is, we have all these negative thoughts about this inner child, this little child. You would never foist that on an actual child. yet we think nothing of doing it to ourselves.
Right.
And once you give yourself that break, that clears the way for the self-awareness.
Kind of makes me think about something else you talked about, the power of story. And how we all kind of create an outcome of an event that hadn't even happened yet. But I think I can also kind of tie that into the inner child, because you like you said, you go back and think about, gosh, what if I could have protected them? Can't do it.
Right.
But then we go back to this power of story thing, and that I tie that into anxiety, right? Because you're thinking about the outcome before it's even happened, and now you're already anxious. You're already in the negative. Right. You're already,
Right. People carry tons of stories around with them.
Yeah.
I would urge everybody to kind of get in a quiet place and really think about, what are the stories that you carry around? Here's a story. Anybody who's rich must have screwed somebody over to get there. Maybe your dad was a guy that wasn't successful, and his boss was a jerk, and so if you disdain things that you want, sometimes it allows you to rationalize them.
Right.
So you grew up thinking, well, wait a minute, subconsciously, if I make money and I'm successful, I'm disappointing my father. I mean, it's all these crazy stories, right?
Yeah.
And they're not. The stories sometimes are fairly simple, but the far-reaching pebble effect of how they affect us, sometimes it's not so obvious, another story, somebody can't lose weight. Well, you know what? My mom's fat, my dad's fat, we got big bones, it's in our DNA.
And that's it. You just give up.
That's bullshit.
And that's who you believe who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we glom on to stories. I had a story that, probably somehow when I was this wild young guy and I was drinking, it's edgy, somehow that made my acting better. Absolute bullshit. My acting is so much better and disciplined now than before. It was a story, but I was afraid, if I give up this thing, a lot of rock stars, from what I understand, think that. And I can only tell you, for me, I equate it to being the difference between a guy that's a really good barroom fighter to a professional boxer or MMA guy. 99 out of 100 times, the professional is going to wipe the floor with the other guy. Why? Well, anybody can throw a punch and get lucky once, okay? Same with acting. Anybody can maybe get lucky and accomplish something in a scene once, but can you summon lightning in a bottle again and again and again? When they say to you, we've got 10 minutes before it's lunch, and if we don't get this take, it's going to cost us $100,000 in overtime. That's some pressure, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you know who you are and you've got that self-awareness and everything, then you can summon it, and you don't get afraid of the fear. And you know what I mean?
Right.
And you don't have that story attached to it. Everything's holistic. It all helps each other.
So I think that also ties into the habits that you make. I know you talk a lot about habits.
Yeah.
And the habit feedback loop. What's that?
Well, the habit feedback loop. So habits really are a loop comprised of let's take smoking for a second, okay? So there's an external stimuli, okay? You get stressed out. That causes a craving. Then you start thinking about the cigarette. You have a cigarette, and the nicotine in the cigarette gives you the reward, which is that temporary feeling of well-being. Same with the drink, same with sex, same with gambling, same with anything. And so it's a loop, okay? And so really what it is a dopamine loop, okay? The problem is that sometimes the reward diminishes and you need more and more of it, like in the case of drugs, right? So, if you can learn to disrupt the loop, there's strategies, for instance, making the reward less attractive, okay? So I talk about, for instance, say you have a drinking issue. There's a reason why bars are so attractive. They got beautiful lighting, they got the bottles are beautiful. Everything is there to seduce your senses, right?
Right.
Generally, they have attractive people as bartenders, okay? But if you can reconfigure your perception of the reward. Instead of thinking about a delicious cold beer in a frosty glass with a beautiful head served by, a girl that's an absolute knockout and a bunch of people around who are so happy that you're there. You imagine you belly up to the bar and it's somebody that looks like an absolute ghoul with their skin coming off, and they put a glass of warm, disgusting brown liquid with cigarettes floating in it and flies going around, and you drink it, and it almost makes you vomit.
Right.
And then you imagine yourself up on top of the bar with your pants down, and the next day you go to work and you're on the front page and you've lost your job. I mean, if you play that whole crazy loop through and you make the reward less attractive, it diminishes the craving. Craving also comes from triggers,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I used to love having Jersey Mike's subs.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I didn't have this one. I had this one.
The big one.
And one time I got one and it had this greasy, disgusting black hair in it. And I was just like that. And every time that I think about eating something like that, which I know isn't good for me, I allow myself to think of that and have a visceral internal reaction. And I haven't had one of those in years, despite the fact that I had a place one time. I was staying in an apartment one time, and 20 yards outside of my window was a flashing Jersey Mike sign. So you got to look, your brain messes with you enough. You got to learn how to hack your brain. You know what I mean? Look at the Golden Arches. We all know what the Golden Arches mean. They're ubiquitous, right? Well, there's a reason why that brand identification is so important to companies. You might not even be hungry, and then you see the Golden Arches, and now you're thinking about a Big Mac, right?
Apple pie.
Exactly.
Everything.
And so
Absolutely.
if that's your demon, then you take a different way to work where you know that you're not going to pass the McDonald's sign.
Yeah.
If everybody goes for drinks after work at this great bar that's got this beautiful neon martini glass that seduces you every time you see it, don't drive back that way,
That comes in, that
triggering.
all ties into self-discipline.
It ties into self-discipline, but it also ties into using effective strategies to disrupt habit loops.
Okay, to disrupt the loops. Got it. We're going to kind of wrap it up in just a few minutes, but a couple more things I want to touch on. At the kind of in I think it's Kumite, you talked about there was a section called "Winning Doesn't Matter." He said we need to reinstall the hunger to be the best to win. When people know they will receive the same, this is what really caught my eye. When people know they will receive the same adulation, whether they come in first or last.
Yeah. Yeah, what is this crap where everyone gets a trophy? That's not what's going to cure cancer. That's not what got us to the moon. You know what that is? It's communism, is what it is. Okay? And it absolutely crushes the human spirit to achieve. Okay? You've heard the saying, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's true. I don't think it is. But I do think there's a difference between shame and toxic shame. Shame is not always a bad thing. Shame when you know you didn't do your best can push you to do better, to go and do a diagnostic and look at what wasn't working. Toxic shame, which is judgment and criticism and has no positivity to it, that's what's damaging.
Right.
But, if you work really, really hard and you get third place at a track meet when you really thought you were going to win, yes, it's disappointing. But that disappointment also becomes fuel to drive you to do better.
Right.
And so, I think we're doing a terrible disservice because it's seen as, it all ties into that crap about toxic masculinity and all this stuff. I mean, I could go on and on about that, and I don't want to go off on a tangent. But I think that there's something very noble in the struggle and the fight to be your absolute best and to win. Not win at all costs, not win to the point that you cheat or you do something that dishonors you or whatever, but fighting to win in a way that is, just and empathetic and kind and brings out the best of you. I think that's very important.
So going back to the winning is everything. You can learn just as much from losing, if not more, than you can from the winning.
Absolutely.
So I don't necessarily agree with that statement for that reason.
It goes into what I said about failure as a teacher. Michael Jordan's got this great quote. I'm going to butcher it, but he says something like, I missed 250 shots that lost my team the game. I missed blah 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 3 throws. Da 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 da. He has all these statistics, and he says that's why I'm successful. And it's true. It's the process.
Going back to our kids that we talked about, that's the thing. They're not learning that lesson. They're not learning about failure. They're learning that, this generation, I sound like Clint Eastwood.
Get off my grass.
Get off my lawn, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm that age now, I guess. But I think now there's a sense of entitlement with young generation because I don't think they're having to work for things, the way that we, because I don't think we're too far off in age, but, God, we had to earn stuff. And, when I go back thinking about the coaches I've had, my own father and my brother, I mean, man, it's like, if you're not going to work, then go inside and go play with your toys, that sort of thing. But it's like, today's kids, they expect to have things given because that's what's happening because I see it every day. Yeah. So they don't have any sense of, a work ethic. I need to work, learn how to work for something.
I remember my kids who are terrific kids.
Yeah.
They're very young. My wife and I had this very large house because we had a lot of kids. And I remember saying one time to one of my kids, what do you think this house costs? Mm-hmm. They had no idea, right? And I said, you understand that when you get in the real world, that this isn't how everyone lives, and it's not how you're going to live. Right. You have to achieve this. Because I wanted them to understand that they were very fortunate and blessed to have some advantages, but they were going to have to work to build, their own kingdom.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, my gosh, we've talked about, I could go on for hours and I got so much more. I got so much more, but I don't go into too much detail because I want y'all to get the books. Please get the books. And speaking of where to find those, let's talk about your website, Sean, and how people can engage with you on your website, everything you've got to offer.
Sure,
There's a ton of great things, tools.
You can go to waythecobra.com. I have all sorts of coaching sessions that you can book. My books are there. It's kind of all things me. And
you're acting coaching as well.
My acting coaching, which I'm passionate about.
I can vouch for that. We did an acting seminar, and it was a lot of fun. What I liked about it was that you asked me questions. You made me think. You challenged me. Yeah. So things that I didn't even think about. Right. So take one. If you're just starting out in acting, or if you are acting, hook up with Sean and take one of his acting classes. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Please do reach out. I would love to. I love working with people, coaching, from my books, but also acting because it keeps me sharp.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It keeps me walking it like I talk it. And
right.
I think that's important. And then if you want to get my hot sauce, which I know we haven't discussed yet.
No, we are. We are in just a moment. I'm looking forward to that.
That's at badboyeats.com.
Also, you do stand-up comedy.
I do.
Talk about what got you into stand-up.
Always loved stand-up. Snuck into my first comedy club when I was about 15 years old. Yeah. It was in Niles, Ohio. And I just was spellbound by these guys that could keep the audience, laughing on the edge of their seats with just their words. I will tell you that stand-up comedy has fundamentally changed my acting. If you can get up and do stand-up comedy and you're someone that wants to be an actor, it doesn't matter whether you bomb. It doesn't matter whether you're funny. The simple act of getting up there and putting it out there will begin to fundamentally change who you are as a person and as an actor. And I also love it too. It's that, immediate reciprocity with the crowd, just me and my words.
So, how are you coming up? The writing's got to be difficult.
Writing's hard. Hard.
What's your advice? So people are just starting out in stand-up. What is your advice when it comes to writing?
Yeah, you know what? Audiences, with the exception of few comedians, like someone like a Stephen Wright, I don't know if that's generational, but audiences can tell if you're coming up with a story that is not rooted in truth. Now, I mean, sure, part of what's funny is you make it hyperbolic, or it's got a spin to it and a perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take things from your real life, like, I mean, for me, it wasn't hard. I mean, I talk about, I had 5 kids, or the dream killers, as I call them. I mean, it's just like, I married a woman with 4 kids and I have 1. I mean, karate's bad boy. It's like, I mean, all I do is I look at my life, and from there I go, wow, I do have kind of a weird life. What about my life is funny? What about it did I think was going to be like this, but it turned out like this? And when you start doing it, and listen, it takes a really long time to come up with just like 10 minutes of really solid material.
Yeah.
It takes years to come up with like 30 minutes. So and again, it's the process. It's the process. Yeah.
So when you write, I'm going to get into your mind a little bit when you write. So do you write what you think is funny, what you would laugh at, or do you write what you think is going to make the audience laugh?
I write what I think is funny.
Or you think is funny?
If you try and please people with your acting or your writing, that's kind of the kiss of death.
Right.
I'll relate it more to acting and taking action. Make a choice. Make a choice and execute it in your acting. It might be the wrong choice. It might not be the best choice. It might not necessarily work, but there's something that comes out of the kinetic activity of taking action that you're either learning from it, you're refining it, you don't know what's going to happen next because you're working with another actor and don't know what they're going to do, and that might spin off. It might start like, I made this choice and it's not really working, and then they do something, and then you react naturally within the parameters of the character, and before you know it, we got a scene that something's going on here, Yeah. So you don't want to get into a situation in stand-up or in acting where you're prejudging how the audience is going to act. And again, you're not in the present. It causes anxiety.
In the stories.
Are they going to? Are they going to laugh or aren't they going to laugh? And you also, when you're doing stand-up, sometimes they listen for a minute. You know what I mean? You might think, wait, they didn't laugh there where they usually do. And you can't let it fluster you. You just got to stay in the process.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you do open mic night starting out?
When I was really, really, really young.
Okay.
I did open mic nights. But, I started doing General Hospital in 1992. And so I was able to get, professional gigs, get paid to do it since 1992.
Got it.
And with Cobra Kai and everything, I mean, I was turning stuff down. I just didn't have time to do it, but I love doing it.
That's awesome.
I do.
Who was your favorite stand-up comic growing up?
Growing up, Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, God, I mean, we grew up with some. I love Rodney.
Rodney. For some reason, I've been watching a lot of Rodney lately. Watching his clips. Old. Man, it crushes. It absolutely does. And I love watching, I'm going to really date myself, but I love watching those Dean Martin roasts.
Oh, yeah.
You see Ronald Reagan on it, and Don Rickles and Sammy Davis.
Yeah.
And it was so organic and so real. And you really felt like they were just a bunch of friends hanging out, making fun of each other.
I mean, Rickles was like what Jeff Ross is like today, pretty much, like the roast master general.
Yeah.
Okay, as we wrap up, charities. I know you're real involved with a lot of charities.
I am.
And you talked about you talked out about bullying. What other charities are you involved with?
So I'm really excited that my wife and I were just signed in as special service agents for the SPCA.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
And before I came here today, I was plowing through this 80-hour course that I have to take to become an actual officer. If animal control is to protect people from animals, what we do is to protect animals from people. And it gives us the opportunity to have a unit that's armed and actually go and stop animal abuse. And I'm a huge animal lover, so that's something that's near and dear to my heart. Another charity that I'm really involved in is one that my mother started, and it's called Oneness.
Okay.
And Oneness is dedicated towards creating unity, to creating, fostering what's alike about us instead of shining a light on what's so different, which we don't need any help doing that. And that's something I'm really involved with. And again, as I said, the anti-bullying, I do a lot of speaking about that, go right in and talk to kids in their elementary schools. And it's really rewarding when you're able to leave thinking, wow, I might have actually just made a difference and helped these kids have a different perspective.
So going back to the service to others.
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
My final question that I like to ask, this is kind of like my James Lipton moment, if you've ever seen Actor Studio, question I love to ask those who've succeeded in Hollywood, brutal truth. So this is kind of a full circle back to your medical situation and kind of the ultimatum that the studio gave you. You're the perfect person to ask this question to. So given that period in time, how many kids, so let me start with a quote first from Kumite. You talk about how many kids aspire to be famous adults without any notion of what they want to be famous for. So for those, Sean, who are looking to break into the entertainment business, what is your no-holds-barred brutal truth about Hollywood?
It's extremely, extremely difficult. The chances of coming to Hollywood and becoming a successful actor are daunting, but it happens every day. I was a guy that stood in line with 2,000 people and was picked out by an Academy Award-winning director, and it changed the trajectory of my career and my life. And so if you are absolutely convinced that this is what you want to do with your life, then don't allow anybody to tell you different, but prepare yourself. Have respect for it. Understand the gravitas that the choice of embarking on a career in the arts has, because there's a lot easier ways to make money in this world if that's what you want to do. There's a lot of rejection and disappointment, and you have to learn psychologically how to manage that yourself. Took me a really long time. And you have to put the work in. There's a lot of work that goes into learning the different skill sets that you need. And one of the very first ones, before you even think about an acting class, take time and work on that self-awareness. Think of it like a creativity tree. Go to museums, watch plays, watch old movies, study a foreign language, travel, take a martial art, take gymnastics, walk in nature. All of these things, because at the end of the day, you're going to be asked to play a lot of different things, and it's always easier and more authentic to draw from your own emotional and experiential Rolodex than having to create something that you have no experience with.
Right.
And people always say to me, how do I become an interesting actor? And I say, be an interesting person. How do you become an interesting person? Be an interested person. Be curious.
It's a good one to end on. It's a great one to end on. Let's go ahead and try the sauce. Let's go try the sauce before we officially conclude. Let's give it a try. So I brought some chips. I know these are not really chip sauces, but I couldn't bring chicken or
That's okay.
Or
no, these
beef.
are chip sauces.
These are okay.
Now, are you a guy that likes the heat, or what's your tolerance?
You know what? I haven't anything super, super spicy that would make me cry.
Well, let's start with this one.
Or totally make my face red. But you know what? I'm going to be a Cobra today.
All right.
And I'm going all in. That's what we're going to do.
So let's start with red pepper punch.
Get a couple bowls here.
Red pepper punch is delicious.
Okay.
It's about a 4 out of 10 on the heat scale.
Okay. Red pepper punch. All right.
So I put it in tomato soup. I put it in tuna and make tuna melts. Put it on pizza, pasta sauce. I think it's really delicious.
Let's see. I'm going to try to crunch away from the microphone. Get some here. Oh, flavor is definitely there.
Yeah?
My God. I'm not even kidding.
It's good, right?
Man, that's good.
It really is. It really is.
That's really good.
All right. Now we're going to try Cobra Venom. Cobra Venom has the Carolina Reaper in it.
Cobra Venom. What's the Carolina?
Carolina
what is the Carolina Reaper?
The Carolina Reaper is one of the hottest peppers there is. But I will tell you this. It's not one of those sauces that's just hot to say it's the hottest.
Okay.
It's got a real bite, and then it dissipates, and it finishes with a really nice taste.
Okay.
So you don't need a lot of it.
Cobra Venom.
Yep.
Okay. The Carolina Reaper. Let's see. That's got some bite.
Right?
Definitely like a Cobra. It has some bite. That's good.
It's good though, right?
Just some right amount of spice.
Okay.
That was really good.
Good. Now this is Mango Madness.
Okay.
It has the habanero pepper, and it has Indian mango, which is sweet, but has a low glycemic index. So if you're following a keto diet, it's only got 1 gram of sugar. This is delicious on salmon, chicken, really good on wings and on ribs. And you can use it as a marinade too.
Full disclosure, I've never in my life had habanero.
It's about an 8 out of 10.
That's all right.
Okay. I'm impressed you haven't had anything to drink.
Again, this is what Cobras do. We're all in. We're all in.
I love it.
Let me get something. Let me get it. Let me get my money's worth here. That's good too.
Right?
Not so bad. The heat, yeah.
There's heat, but it's not to the exclusion of the flavor, right?
I gotta tell you, I'm not even kidding you. These are fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate
These are
that.
fantastic.
I appreciate
really
that.
Good.
Yep.
And where again can they get these?
You can
Sean?
get these at badboyeats.com. And we're doing a lot of live shows, and we are in select stores across the country, getting in more and more all the time. Okay. But right now, the best place to get it is at badboyeats.com.
Okay.
Get it right out to you.
This will probably air in another couple of days.
Okay.
When is your next appearance that you'll be having your
my next appearance is March 17th in Simi Valley at the barbecue. May 17th, yes. Yeah, May 17th at the barbecue headquarters in Simi Valley. I don't have the address, but you know what I can do? I can send you the digital promo, and if you want to put it up,
we'll put the graphic
I'll be there in person. I'll have the sauce. Come say hi. Try some hot sauce.
There's merch.
There's going to be merch. I'm going to have photos and stuff like that.
Booked. You can get the books there too.
Books. I'm going to have everything.
Everything. Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. This was without question a master class in life, and this is exactly why, yes, he is a very successful actor, entertainer, but you can see why I really want to have him on, because I guess I told you before when we Zoomed, I said, when I found out that you're in this space, the personal development space, this is where I really want to talk to you.
I really appreciate it.
I wanted to connect with you on that. Hope you found this conversation as relatable as I did. Remember, I read the books and I texted you right away. Sean, I finished the books. I incredibly relatable. Like just everything that was in the book, both books, was just, man, this is me. I've been through this. I've done this, right. or this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to work on. So I think these are incredible manuals to help navigate through life, to achieve whatever you desire, to help you find that meaningful happiness that so many of us struggle to find, and to become the best version of yourself. My thanks to Jesse Tugas for engineering this epic episode. Good to have you back and to work with you again. Please give him a follow. He does stand-up as well. And check out his stand-up act if you're in the Los Angeles area. He works his ass off. I know. I've seen on TikTok, on Instagram. Actually, if you go on his TikTok, you'll like this. And I hope I'm not embarrassing you, because it is epic, Jesse. You did, there's a clip of you doing stand-up on your birthday, if I'm correct, right? And you were up on the stage. You had your friends there. And can I say the word bombed? Is that okay? But when I say that, he turned it into the most epic recovery I've ever seen.
I love it.
I've ever seen. You've got to watch it. Go down this TikTok. It's incredible.
I'm going to do that, yeah.
It's incredible. The recovery was amazing. Just was not phased. He just said, screw it. And he also has a podcast, a Successful Failure podcast, and is always thinking of Melrose Podcast here in LA. They're always my go-to studio whenever I'm out here. And of course, a very special thank you to my guest, Sensei, Sean Kanan. Thanks for making the time, and for all those of us watching and listening. So you're a breath of fresh air and a class act.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And I'm going to come back out here. Like I said, you can also
maybe we'll do with my wife.
We're going to do it with your wife.
All right.
Way of the Cobra Couples. I'm going to read this. I'm going to come back to LA. We're going to sit right at this table with your wife.
Can't wait.
We're going to do it. And please, I beg you, go to his website, engage with it, follow him. So many tools he has to offer you. Please do it. And we will see you next time. And as always, you want it, go get it. God bless.
Keep me up at night. You'll hear me coming from a mile away. I'm out here every day. I didn't come to play. No.